Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. And here I am again, your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, to share information with you from really cool people doing really cool things. Today, I have a really exceptional guest with me. This is someone that we could all use in our lives. Couldn't we all use just someone to give us a different perspective? Every athlete has a coach. And at the end of the day, we could all use a health and wellness coach. And today, I have just such a person here joining me. I have Miss Janna Burnam with me. Janna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yes, we've been working on this for a little bit, right? Trying to get you here. Here you are now. And I had a chance to look at some of the cool stuff you've done. And you know my beautiful wife, Shauna. You guys know each other.
Yes,
and so she was the
decade.
link for us to connect. So I'm eternally grateful for her. She's gotten some really cool people to come on the show that we get great feedback on. And I know from what she's told me and what I researched, it's going to be the same with you.
Oh, thank you. The feeling's mutual. I adore Shauna. She's
that's awesome. So,
definitely a difference maker.
She is a difference maker for sure. Well done. Good wordplay there. I like that. When you if someone's trying to define what a health and wellness coach is, what is that?
Yeah, it's someone really that helps you bring in different lifestyle factors to kind of increase your well-being. And that can look a lot of different ways, whether that's stress management or nutrition, diet, physical activity, more connections with different relationships. It can really look a lot of different ways. What I like to do in particular is help people figure out rituals, routines, and habits, kind of systems for their life to kind of take that chaos and bring it down to calm. So they can just live more flowing, peaceful lives.
Chaos to calm. I love that vision, that just seeing something like a big tornado of dust coming down to a nice settled ease. I love that.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
how does one get into the field of health and wellness? Because there's a lot of people on the internet now giving advice about lots of things. Some people qualify to do so, whether they have a degree or not, but they're very qualified through life experience or through wisdom or talent or whatever. They're good. Some people giving stuff just talking off the top of their lip, like, 18-year-olds talking about how to be a success in life,
right?
To 50-year-olds kind of thing. And not that they don't have validity, but they don't have experience and depth and richness to what they've done. So for you, give us a little bit about your background. I know that you worked with kids and teaching. How did all this begin? And where was your journey to get you to be a health and wellness specialist?
Yeah, well, I was a preschool teacher and just kind of ended up there because my kids were in preschool. And it was a really great way for me to hone some skills and be a mom and work with kids, which I love doing so much. But it was when my youngest left preschool, I just thought, well, these kids aren't going to be here forever. And so when they're out of the house and they're on their way living their lives, what do I really want to be doing in the world? And I thought I wanted to be a therapist. And so I had dropped out of college and had my daughter at 20 years old.
And what were you studying then?
I was studying landscape architecture.
Okay, landscape architecture. So a very different course of study.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, which was a little hard to do in Denver. But I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I went back to school to try and figure that out. I thought I wanted to be a therapist. But then I found coaching. And I thought, gosh, this is all the self-study I've been doing for so long in terms of nutrition and meditation and stress resiliency and just trying to build a better sense of self. And so I found health and wellness coaching through the lifestyle medicine program at MSU Denver and created my own degree. I took a lot of psychology classes and lifestyle medicine classes and wellness coaching to kind of learn that skill, because coaching is a skill in itself. And then you can apply that coaching to so many different things, whether it's business coaching, health and wellness coaching. So what I chose to do was just kind of lifestyle coaching. And it's kind of founded on this idea of our lives aren't made up of grand gestures, but it's the tiny little things we do every day. That's what creates our life.
So good.
So what are those tiny little things we're doing, and who do we want to be, and what life do we want to create, and what are the tiny little things we can do every day to get there, and how can we work those into our day, and what kind of system do we need to work that into our day?
Have you found that, and I wrote this quote down that you just said, it basically was the thriving in life comes from the small choices that we make every day. And that's essentially what you were just talking about, right? You talked about the little things, and little things are done by choices. I was just having a meeting. So there's a group of people in our practice that I am responsible for coaching them, mentoring them. And those are people that from my purview have a potential to have a really big impact on the rest of the business and smaller teams within the company, that kind of thing. And so I was just prior to this conversation, I was just in with one of those. I had 2 of those meetings this morning, and I was in with one of them. And we talked about the little things. We talked about choice. And they are one and the same because you can choose to do the little things. The little things I found are always, they're simple, but they're not always easy, as Jim Rohn would say, right? Like, I know I should get up enough time to do X, Y, and Z before I go to work, whether it's workout, study, read, whatever it is. I know I should. It's just a little thing getting up at blank time. But it's so easy, or it's so simple to do, but it's not always easy. Is that what you're talking about between little things and choices?
Yeah, it really is. And it comes down to that choice and really just being mindful of what's happening in that moment. When I have that opportunity to choose, what's happening in my personal experience that's keeping me from doing that. And sometimes it really takes sitting down with a person and looking at, well, what held you back from that this week? What were those things? What was going on inside of you? And just being more mindful of your emotional experience, your feelings, your sensations, your thoughts. There's always something that might be holding us back.
Do you think, I had to write this down just right now because it was so powerful. It just hit me like a hammer right in my little melon here. When you talked about asking yourself, what's holding me back? Have you ever considered, or do you coach this to people, that sometimes the reason that they're held back is because they're not self-aware of what they really want and need, but instead they're taking outside or exterior projections of what someone else thinks their life should look like. And then all of a sudden, if there's no overlap and synergy between what you want and the actions that you take, if it's someone else's stuff that they're wanting for you, that even though it might be great stuff, if it's not your stuff, it's a lot harder to knuckle down and to make those simple choices. Have you seen that in all your coaching experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it always comes back to, or a lot of the time it can come back to our identity. That's kind of the root of what creates behavior change, right? Which is essentially what we're talking about is behavior change. But who are you wanting to be, and who do you see yourself as? Are you seeing yourself as who you want to be, or are you seeing yourself as your parents have seen you and your grandparents have seen you, or the people in your life? So being really clear on the identity you want to create so that those habits can start forming, because those habits are going to create that identity, right? It's like a loop.
Yes. How big should you dream in that regard? And here's why I say this. I was at a wedding a couple of weeks ago. And at the wedding, I ran into a young guy who I knew. Hadn't seen him in a while, been friends with him. Literally, I've known his parents, went to high school with him. So I've known this kid since he was born. And when I was asking him how things are going, hadn't seen him in a while, he goes, well, I'm kind of struggling. I'm having some issues, this, that, and the other thing. Now, I say kid, he's 30 years old. So he's not a baby, right? He's a full-grown man, but he's having some very childish behaviors, meaning he's being lazy. He's not taking care of his responsibilities. He has a family to support, and he's not teaching them the things that they should by example. And the best thing is, in my mind, he's self-aware enough to know it. He's like, you know what? I know that I can't bust on my kids for not picking up their rooms if I'm not picking up stuff around the house, this kind of thing, right? So when I hear that, here was my answer to him, and it triggered me by what you just said. I said, you know what? Sometimes you just have to define who you are. And when you say, this is who I am, and if this is not reflecting who I am, then I need to change that immediately. But how far can you go with saying who I am before your subconscious doesn't believe it? Saying that you're cleanly is one thing. Saying that you're a billionaire when you're living in the projects, is that too big a leap for the subconscious to make? Do we need to make incremental growths of who we are and grow into a bigger coat, so to speak, over time?
Yeah, I like that idea of incremental growth. And also, if you want, like saying I am a billionaire, but what would a billionaire do? I am disciplined, right? Like, what are the characteristics of a billionaire? So it may not look like this particular thing, but if I know I'm disciplined enough, then I'm going to get to this certain place. So it's almost reframing to that identity or that thing we want to grow into something that's going to serve us no matter what.
Yes. So for people who may not be familiar with the concept of reframing, can you define that and then give a simple example that people could take? Because we got viewers and listeners from all over the place that are checking this out. And I think reframing is one of the most important contexts that any human can have because it gives you ultimate freedom. So I would really love your thoughts and explanation on reframing.
Yeah, so actually my husband and I had a really good example of reframing the other day. My daughter just went off to college, and so I'm having a lot of feelings about it, right? And I'm just, I'm so sad, and I'm not her mom anymore, and she's gone, all these things that they're painful, and it's hard. And he is my ultimate reframing coach. But it's always that question of, yes, this is hard, and what else is true? And also, we'll be able to live this really exciting life. We'll be able to travel and do all of these things together. You're still her mom, just the relationship is changing. You're going to be able to be her mom on a totally different level. So it's being honest and valid in where you are in your emotional experience with this, and also what else is true.
I got to tell you, that is one of the most powerful questions that I think I've ever heard right there. And what else is true? Because I've always said, this is what I taught my kids, and when I'm working with folks, I'll say 2 things can be true at the same time. Mm-hmm. So don't get so locked into what you think is this way, because 2 things can be true at the same time. So something could be really bad, and you think it's all because of this, but another thing could be happening at the same time. But to hear it formed in that question, that is beautiful. And what else is true about this? That opens the door for ultimate possibility, right?
Yeah, absolutely. While also honoring where you are,
Okay, yeah, go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think it's really important. We can't have, we can have so much joy in life, but we also have to honor the entire human experience. We have to honor the difficulty and the pain, and this experience is really hard, and I miss her so much. And also, this is really exciting and joyful, and I'm so incredibly proud of her, and she's a courageous human being. But that pain is valuable, and it's part of the human life, the human condition. Suffering is part of the human condition.
Yes. Do you find that there's a way out of suffering? And here's what I mean. When you look at some of the Buddhist philosophies, they say the best way to end suffering is to help end the suffering of others. And as you're very well aware, Sean and I have had some amazing suffering in our life. In the last 4 months, we lost a son. And, some of the listeners may have heard this already. Some of this may be new. But I've never had suffering like that. I'm like, holy crap. It's like the weight of 10 worlds, because we were so close, and he was 25 years old, everything to live for. And I've told people now, it's been 4 months out. I even started saying this at 4 weeks out. I'm a better human being right now than I was before, because I've taken the best that I remember about him and that Connor shared with the world in his young body, and I've tried to incorporate that into my life. So not only does it keep him alive, but it's helping me be more alive. So what do you say as a definition of suffering? How much should we have? How do we deal with it? Any thoughts that you have, that because everyone's going to go through suffering, what's the best, most productive way to handle that?
Yeah, it's really coming back to, I always go back to ritual and spiritual practice. Really, whichever word sits better with you. I like to use spiritual practice. I know some people prefer ritual, but it's just having those grounding things in your life every day that you go back to. It's sitting with yourself, even if it's just 20 minutes a day, sitting with yourself and asking, what's going on with me right now? Where am I emotionally? Is there anything that's bothering me? What can I celebrate? What am I grateful for? But finding something, either it's first thing in the morning, last thing you do at night, that's going to be your buoy, your safety net when life gets hard, because it's going to. It's just, you're constantly riding the waves of life, and what kind of spiritual practice can you create for yourself to keep it from pulling you under, to hitting the bottom of the ocean? How can you ride that wave with grace while also honoring yourself and what you're going through and your experience?
That's a really profound and deep answer. And that takes me back a little bit to your training. You have the certifications in health and wellness, and you have national designations. When you're going through that program, and you said you kind of created your own deal too, right? Like by taking these other courses and all this stuff, to get to that level of wisdom, like you just shared with us. Tell me about that curriculum, that program. Was there an awakening to you? Because it sounds like, like you said, you've been practicing these disciplines, habits, and rituals for years and years and years, and this was your way to express those. Did you find the formal training to be really helpful in helping you learn concepts like what you just shared with dealing with suffering, or was that more innate and then, it was just the official designation of the other stuff?
Yeah, it's just been the school of life, some of it, and then as far as the behavior change and creating habits, that comes from my more formal training. So I went through my own grieving period about 10 or 12 years ago. That it just really took me under, and I really had to learn, and that's what I learned from all of it, is how do I honor myself and what I'm going through while not letting this completely tear me down. And it was learning those spiritual practices and that light, that solid practice that kept me afloat during that really difficult time, and just staying really in tune with myself, while also using people like Shauna and a therapist and other people for support and friends. But I would say some of it's just life experience, but creating the behavior change and how to add this to your life, that's where my coaching comes in, and just meeting people where they are and figuring out what they want to create for themselves, because it's not going to be the same for every person. Not everyone can sit in 30 minutes of meditation.
Yes.
But it's just figuring out what that person needs.
You brought something up there, I think that's really important. Some people listening to this, you said rituals or spiritual practice, and you like the term spiritual practice. For someone who, spiritual is such a wild term, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's religious and then there's spiritual. I went to a Christian school growing up from 6th grade through high school, and there was a lot of religion taught there. There was a lot of Bible verses and Bible classes and concepts. There was a lot of that. But spirituality is more of a relationship. That's the way I always saw it. And that ideally, the effort that you're putting in with your religious work leads you to be a more spiritual person, but not always, right? They're distinct. They're not mutually inclusive. And they're not mutually exclusive. They kind of work together hand in hand. But there are plenty of people I know who are not religious, who are deeply spiritual. So for those folks that are listening, that are wondering, like, she's talking about this spiritual practice business. What does that look like if they're confused? Or even if they're, I read 2 chapters of the Bible every day or 2 chapters of the Quran every day, and it's my duty. That's my checklist item. How do you bring spirituality to life in these spiritual practices? Is it journaling? Is it reading? Is it praying, meditating? How could someone go about creating spiritual practice? Because you've mentioned it several times as a foundational piece for, I'm sure, not only dealing with suffering, but with succeeding in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It can really look, and that's kind of where the coaching comes in hand, but you could also go to my website or Instagram and get ideas of things you can actually do, like a gratitude practice and how to do that, books to read for inspirational reading, walking meditations, meditation, gratitude, journaling, all of those things. But it's more of just trying a little bit and seeing what fits. I'm going to try this for a week and I'm going to see if it fits. I'm going to try this for a week and figuring out what clicks and just kind of building it from there. And I say ritual, just spiritual to me is just believing in something bigger than us, that's out there. And some people don't believe that. And so the word ritual might be more comfortable for them. And that's just more connecting with themselves versus connecting with a higher power, or could be a religious practice if you practice a certain religion. But I think it comes down to just trying a few things on and seeing what fits for you.
And when you use that metaphor of trying it on and seeing what fits, I'm going to switch that into a different framework and say to see what works for you. And so now let me ask you, how would someone know if it's working? If they're doing something for a week, they try any kind of these practices that you mentioned, would they feel more at peace, lighter, enlightened in some way? How do they know if it's fitting, if that thing that they're trying on is fitting?
Yeah, I would say, especially meditation, it's a hard thing for people to jump into. And if it's just really uncomfortable, then maybe, it's causing more chaos than calm. If it's just like, this is not me, I don't like this is making me too uncomfortable, put it on the shelf. maybe try a walking meditation, a way to connect with nature, something to move the body so that you can work on the body moving and while working on the breath at the same time and really connecting your mind and body that way. Because usually people can fall into one or the other. But yeah, I would say if it's causing more chaos, then put that on the shelf for a little bit and come back to something else.
I like that. In my experience, I've always wanted to be a great meditator. Always wanted it, but my mind is so busy. I have sports talk on in the background of my office all day. I'm listening to podcasts every single day. I'm reading a book. Then I'm trying to unwind by watching TV for, hour or whatever at night. My mind is always working. And I know I know we need silence. We need respite. We need to recharge, right? I know it. And so one of the things that I've found that's worked for me, and you just hit on it, is that the difference is that for me to quiet my mind, it's not a walking meditation, but instead it's doing Qigong, which I basically just came across and started learning from one person and incorporating just different thought patterns in Qigong. And what I felt, me trying it on that knows that works for me, as opposed to just sitting in a lotus position, which by the way, I'm so inflexible, I can't sit in a lotus position without a block or something, is that whether I do it for 5 minutes or 25 minutes, there's something to that for me that says this fits. Is that what you're talking about when you're trying all these practices? Because for some people, journaling is maddening.
I know.
For other people, journaling
is magic, right?
It's magic, yeah. Is that what you're talking about? And then if you would speak to journaling a little bit, that one got a fun reaction out of you. So I want to hear your thoughts on journaling.
Yeah, because I can go into journaling sometimes and it works really well because for me, it's just trying to figure out where I'm at emotionally, what's going on. Am I snapping at my partner? Usually if I'm snapping at my partner, there's some sort of emotional experience I'm having that I'm not giving enough attention to. So I think in some ways journaling is really great for uncovering that. But some people, and I have before, left journaling just angry. Like, this did not help me. This only brought more chaos into my life. But yeah, it's finding that thing. And it may not be the same thing week to week. I find that usually if I'm in that space, I need to move my body. I need to get some sort of energy out. But there's Qigong, there's Tai Chi, there's emotional releasing that you can do with your body. There's so many different things to try. And that's kind of the beauty of where the coaching comes in, is just giving you the time, the space, and the opportunity to try all those different things and see what works for you.
I love, love, love that. Speaking of that term love, I was looking at your website and I saw something that I was intrigued by, because for me, one of the biggest characteristics that I always try to invoke is a sense of positivity and love. Like, it's just important for me to feel good in my interactions. You have something called love science. What is love science?
Oh,
like, what kind of framework do you give to love science?
I don't know if remind me where you saw it on my website.
It was on the website. Yeah, it was on the page, the about page, talking about love science.
Oh, I love science. So yeah, I think I may have misinterpreted a little bit. I do a lot of the work that I do is science-based.
I gotcha.
And science practices, but also a little bit, I like to say I'm a little bit woo-woo and I'm a little bit science.
A little bit rock and roll.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So here's what I saw, capital L, capital S. So I thought love science was a term. We need to coin that.
I was going to say, that sounds really interesting. We should create
We're going to develop a love science curriculum.
Next podcast for sure.
That's right. So we're going to have something cool to talk about. That's awesome. Okay, we'll skip love science then.
Yeah.
That's on the table. We're gonna come back to that. So tell me about this. I want to talk about coaching for a minute. Coaching is incredibly, like you say, it's an incredibly intricate skill set. You have some of the best players of any kind of sport, musical instrument, whatever, actors and actresses, entertainers. They can't necessarily show someone else how to do that well, just because they were masters at it. What are some of the principles in coaching that you use to help people get a point or help them make a breakthrough? What are some of the concepts so that if someone's listening or watching out there, they can know, you know what, I can apply these things and I need to get a coach. How do you go about looking at that?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people come just feeling overwhelmed or feeling stuck and feeling like they really don't know what the next thing to do is. And it's really kind of breaking apart your life a little bit, getting rid of the things that aren't serving you and figuring out a system for that life. And then, but it's also knowing when to encourage and kind of knowing when to hold you by the fire, knowing when to push you a little harder and when to show you lots of compassion, be your cheerleader, but also push you a little higher and a little harder.
Do you go by personality on that, where some people, you know, that you push them in a different circumstance and you give them the stick instead of the carrot in this situation? Other people in the same situation, you would give them the carrot instead of the stick?
Yeah, everyone's so different,
right?
And they respond so differently based on their perspective and their life experience, and their relationship with themselves is such a big part of that too. But I love to use motivational interviewing and just meeting people where they are and figuring out, where are they in this change process? You know, are you really ready to do it right now? Or are you just kind of thinking about it? And any place is okay, but how do we get you to that next level? And it's really being able to figure out where you are in that change process. And
is that what motivational interviewing is? Is it essentially like a consultation between a doctor and their patient at the beginning to understand where they are at in any given process? Is that what that term means, motivational interview?
Yeah, and it's kind of a 4-step process, and all the steps are kind of I'm losing them right now. Should have studied a little bit on my way over. But it's meeting them where they are and then just trying to push that up a little bit further. And then the transformational change is more of knowing where they are in that change process. Are you just thinking about it? Are you ready to start tomorrow? Do you know you need to do this and you're so not even there yet? Like, just being really honest with where you are in that process.
It sounds to me like self-awareness is a critical point and a critical skill for us all to get. Would you speak a little bit to that? Because that's one of my things that I've learned over the last probably 10 years is when I've focused on my own self-awareness. But if I can help people know, hey, you got to know who you are. You got to spend time focusing on who you are, because that's, again, there's so much noise, right? There's so much noise.
Yeah, and for me, like, I always do come back to that ritual or spiritual practice, is like that really gives an opportunity for people to see where they are and to really listen to themselves and figure out where they are with this particular thing in their life that they're wanting to change.
With the self-awareness?
Yeah, with the self-awareness, it's also me listening to their language. So even though they may not be able to identify where they're at, I can help them identify where they are just by the language that they're using. And that's kind of where a lot of that training comes in.
Do you see people that have a lot of positive speak, I'm this, I'm that, and all positive words, but like you just said, by the tone, by something, you know that that's a protection mechanism, that it's not really where they are. They're really kind of backwards of where they think that they are because they want to put on this thing, and then again, it's non-self-awareness. It's self-wanna-be-ness, not self-awareness. Have you seen that in your coaching and in your kind of working with folks?
Yeah, and I always like to say, like, we respond to energy, the energy that we're putting out there, the feelings that we're putting out there. The universe responds to feelings, not our words, so it doesn't really matter what we're saying. It's what we're really believing and feeling that's creating our experience. So it is really asking those really deep questions to help people figure out truly where they are versus what they're masking or, showing the world or showing themselves, and not being really honest with themselves about where they are and where they want to go.
And a lot of times people need help with that, right? Like, I know unless you've been doing it for a long time, sometimes you don't even know the questions, because again, you're working from a perspective that's, my mom and dad told me that I should be this way. My religion says I should be that way. My job says this is who I should be. And so they don't either know the tools or spend the time to ask those deeper questions of who, what, where, how is it about me? And so that's where a coach comes in, right? Of being able to, that's had experience of people just like you and being able to ask those questions.
Yeah, it's those hard questions, and it's really, I look at coaching as like just putting out that soil and then asking the right questions to kind of get all those weeds out, get all the stuff out that's been holding them back or that they're really struggling with, and then allowing them to plant those seeds that they're really wanting to fruition in their life. But I'm just the soil. They have the seeds, they have the weeds. I have to ask the questions to help them identify those weeds and identify the seeds so that they can get the fruition that they really want. And
when people say they want something and they're they're not showing the effort, right? They're not raking the soil. They're not watering the soil. They're not nurturing the soil. They get real excited and plant some seeds.
Yeah.
And then they get it started, but they're not tending to that garden. Are there certain reasons, typical reasons why people do that? Is it fear of success? Is it fear of failure? Is it lack of true belief in it, lack of execution, or combination of all that?
Yeah, and so I really like to differentiate the difference between like coaching and therapy. And so coaching is really just, and I like to stay in my lane, and that's coaching is where I help people with where they are and where they want to go. And then therapy is kind of more of like looking at your past and how it's affecting where you are right now. And so I would say if someone's not moving along, if something's really holding them back, there might be something back here that needs to be worked out so that they can understand why they're where they're at right now so that they can move forward. Does that make sense?
So good.
It made sense in my mind.
Yeah, no, that's great.
So that's when I do have a list of therapists that I just kind of refer out to if I feel like, and it's always mutual, if they feel like coaching isn't the right thing for them right now.
Oh, I love that. That is so great. And to have that network of people can give your clients / patients for therapists so much confidence and comfort that just because you're doing one thing, you're not finding the results, there's something else, right?
Yeah, and it's still successful, right?
Yes.
You're still figuring out what you need to get to where you want to go. It's just we got to tend to this thing first before we can get to this piece.
I got to ask you something, and I wasn't planning on asking it before just a few minutes ago. What did you notice in COVID? What did you notice with how people changed, with how they were different, and with their habits?
Gosh. I always go back to spiritual practice, but I think that it really made people stop. It really made people look at themselves and their lives, and they used all these things to distract their inner world of maybe what was going on. And everyone was kind of forced to sit with themselves, and a lot came up for all of us. And then we lost those connections, which is another huge part of coaching and well-being, is having those connections, because that's so important in our life. It's impossible to thrive without connections. But that was the biggest thing that I noticed for myself and my family and everyone, and kind of in my circle and in coaching too. And it was the clients I was seeing at that time. It was really incredible because they had so much progress because they were forced to sit still. They didn't have all the distractions. So it was really easy for them to create all of these lifestyle changes that really brought some calm into their life.
That's fascinating. Do you think that would be applicable to people outside of those that were seeking treatment like that? Because my experience is more people put on weight, more people spent more time distracted. And again, two things can be true at the same time. They spent more time with their families, and they spent more time on TikTok, right? They spent more time reflecting, and they spent more time eating while they were doing it. And so it's common for people to say they put on 15 pounds. Remember the freshman 15 in college that we would all hear about? I've seen so many people that they're telling me, oh man, gyms were closed. So if they didn't have something at home, they didn't know what to do outside, and they were pent up. And so I saw a lot of that, but I'm interested because what you say is the beautiful side of it, of man, we had time to connect with our families and self-reflect and do all these things. And I love that. I'm wondering if that was more of a small cohort of the people that really cared, and then the people that didn't know what to do, that were kind of in panic mode. Did they have similar reactions, or did they kind of go the opposite direction?
Well, it kind of comes back to what you were saying about perspective and different people responding to different things. Because the thing with COVID, it was such a traumatic event. And so the definition of trauma really is just losing our sense of safety. And that's what happened to all of us. We lost it. Or, in the very beginning, we didn't know what this thing was. We didn't know how to respond, what to do to keep safe. Do we need to be washing our groceries before they come into the house, know? So it was really, I think it's so varied among people based on their previous life experiences, like how much trauma they've had in their life, how much is this bringing up for them from something they've experienced before, because trauma can be a tricky thing.
And fear is part of trauma, true?
Yeah.
I mean, the fear that still can linger from something that started over 2 years ago is powerful. And if you lop that fear on top of other fears, or they come underneath and behind because of fears you drag with you from the past, man, it just, between that and social disconnect, I'm worried for our kids. I'm worried for our kids. What are you seeing? Because you specialize in a couple groups. You specialize in parents, then you specialize in kids. I know that you worked with little ones in teaching, but then you love these kids that are kind of that mid to end of their teens range. What are you seeing in the people that you're seeing now as far as how they're approaching and moving into life? Is it fearless? Is it fearful? Is it just depends on all the other stuff they bring with them? You know, what are you seeing?
Well, it's really interesting because the teens that I work with primarily, they're just one group I think that was most effective that I've read about is those middle school kids, because they were supposed to be in this place of pulling away from the parents, going outside of the home. So those kids are now 15 and 16, and those are kind of the clients that I'm starting to see a little bit. And there's a little bit more fear, a little bit more social fear. And then it's the parents, and I think the families are starting to realize what they really value. And that's what I really love to do in working with families and parents, is sitting down and really helping them figure out what are their family values, what is most important to them, what are these values that are going to guide us to making decisions for our family, not just to now and tomorrow, but 10 years from now. So I just feel like families and as a whole are just more mindful. But I'm also really keeping an eye on these teens that are coming up, that are 16, 15 right now, that are kind of coming up into my age group. It'll be interesting to see how they're doing, what they're needing right now.
Yes, it's interesting. This morning, I had a chance to do a little, for lack of a better term, presentation for a group of high school kids at Cherry Creek High School. And so you know what Cherry Creek High School is. For those that don't, Cherry Creek High School is a really nice high school. They have incredible facilities. There's a lot of people that have a lot of successful parents that go there. Not everyone, but a lot, right? And so they have this course there that they offer as a 0-hour course. In other words, it's before school starts, where there's about 100 kids Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the fall semester that come in and hear providers or people in the medical and health and wellness field talk about what they do. And this gives all these kids a chance to hear all these perspectives about different things. So I went in and I talked about chiropractic, but of course, it's not just about chiropractic. And this is what I shared with them. I'm like, what you become is driven by who you become, right? We all worry about, especially at that age, what we become, what's going to become of me. Well, you know what? Become the person that you're supposed to be, and the what's going to take care of itself most of the time. And so I'm having this great conversation, but I'm noticing with them, there's a little less interaction. They're in that 16 to 18 range. And I noticed even in this group of kids, they're smart kids. They wouldn't be in that particular group if they're smart kids, but just looking at how they move and their body language, it seems different. I've been doing it many, many, many years. And so today seeing it, they were all great kids and, you know, they were fine, but there's just, I see something that I'm not sure if it's related to anything with COVID, but a lot more slouching posture, head down, not up, not engaged in a human-to-human contact. But boy, if they could get out and talk with their friends on a text or something, they'd be all about that. So like you, I have some I don't know if it's concerns. I'm curious, very curious about that. And, you know, I'd definitely be interested in your take on all of that.
Yeah, and I'm kind of seeing the same thing, and I have the same kind of curiosity. It seems, like I said, like during that COVID years, that's when that social piece of them was supposed to be developing, and they were supposed to be pulling away from the family and not really so much focused on academics. So they were forced to be at home with their family. Were not allowed to see any of their friends for the most part, and all they could really focus on for school was academic, which is the exact opposite of where they were developmentally. So I just think something got lost there. And I think these kids coming up into that are coming up into these they're sophomores now, they'll be coming up into juniors and seniors, are going to need some extra support for sure.
That's good. I hope that people like you are getting the word out to schools and to counselors, because I never thought about that. What you just said hit me so hard, of these junior high kids that are supposed to be kind of starting to separate from family, and also where school doesn't have to be the main concern like it does to go to high school, to get into college, blah, 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 right? That whole thing that we've made up, this was the time. And they missed that. Can you imagine, and you know, I don't know where you were at and all this, but you know, I'm 55, and so my kids are all grown. I can't imagine the stress, the tension, and the pressure between me and my kids if they were between 5 and 16 and I'm trying to teach them. I'm trying to help lead this company. I'm trying to grow myself. I'm trying to stay fit. Like, there is not the resources for one person or even a couple. God forbid you're in a single family home, right? Single parent.
Yes.
How did they ever do that? And how would you ever be expected to be a great teacher and a great parent and a great worker?
It's too much.
Holy cow. I'm amazed that people made it through without killing each other.
Right. Not to mention all the fears and anxieties of your physical health and what that was going to mean for your family. And,
Absolutely.
being able to protect your family. And yeah, it's incredibly challenging. And I think we're still going to be coming out of it and seeing things pop up throughout our culture and our society for a long time. But just staying present to it. And as a difference makers in the community, just being aware and finding ways to support. But that's interesting. I'm glad you shared that about talking to that high school, because I could definitely see that.
Yeah, it was fascinating to me. And again, great kids. I saw it last year too. The year before, I couldn't do it, right? I couldn't go because the thing was closed. So I did something, on Zoom and went to their houses, and everyone's just like, yeah, whatever, boop, But it's fascinating. And here's why I know they're great kids, because from last year's talk, he'd saved all the thank you notes that the kids had written for me. And so I brought them home today after this talk. These were not these kids. This was last year's group. And there were 11 of them, 11 thank you notes. So they didn't have to do it, right? These were people that decided to do it. And it literally brought tears to my eyes because of and they acted the same way as this group did. Where you're wondering, what the hell is anything getting through to you, And their heads are down and their heads are on their desks and this and that. And there's some eye contact and this and that. But those letters were so precious of these kids that are in that age range. It was fantastic. So anyway.
But back to our reframing, this is happening. This has been hard for them, but what else is true?
Yes.
What did they gain from this? That's, to be continued and
Yes.
see later on down the line.
We're going to see a lot of brilliance created, I think, and I'm being serious, in the video game world. If that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But I think that space is going to continue to grow because kids did so much of that. I think in innovation electronically and digital innovation, I think there was so much time spent there that we will see, and people communicate that way now.
Yeah, absolutely.
They literally have these, and I'm going to do air quotes here, in-depth relationships online. And whether those are legitimate, again, two things can be true at one time, like you said, and what else is true, I think that's where we're going to see a lot. I hope we also see alongside that, though, is, boy, I really miss being with you, walking arm in arm, hand in hand around the lake, talking about life in nature, right? I hope that's not lost as we make these other incredible gains.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, the loneliness epidemic was happening long before COVID came along, and it does go back to all that text relationships and just social medias. We think it's filling this need of connection, but studies are showing that it really isn't. And so while tech is so wonderful and is adding so much to our lives, we have to come back to connection. Social connection, looking at someone, speaking, meeting face to face, talking, taking a walk around the lake, like you were saying. And I think that's what a lot of these teens need to hear, and like young adults have to hear right now, and even all of us really, but especially that age group, is how important. Don't let those social relationships on social media replace the importance of coming face to face.
Yes. Speaking of coming face to face, what are the most beautiful things you're seeing in the community and population that you have the biggest eye on right now, whether it's your client base or whether it's, the Denver area, the United States, wherever you really put your attention? What is the good stuff? Because we've talked a lot today about what's going on and some of the tensions and traumas and how we get through it and all that kind of stuff. Where's the momentum that you're seeing in our society right now?
It's interesting you asked that, because I was just thinking empathy and compassion. I think those are two words that people are really starting to listen to and take note of. And I think empathy and compassion is something that you gain by going through suffering, going through trauma, going through difficult times. And we all just had this collective moment together. So I think coming out of that, we've learned to have so much more empathy and compassion for each other.
And that's what we need, right? I think more
Absolutely.
empathy and compassion and tolerance to other people's their viewpoints and how they do things. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you one more question. This has been an amazing episode. Like, I feel like we could talk. I'm just getting started. I haven't even looked at my notes, right?
I know.
I'm writing more stuff than I'm even looking at. So we're not even going to get to all this stuff. But if you were given one piece of advice somewhere along the way that has just really been a fundamental anchor for you, or something that you've learned that would fit into that slot, what would it be for those of us that want to learn from you?
God, the first thing that popped in my head was know thyself, and be true to thyself, and just making that time for yourself each day to really know what's going on in your world.
Beautiful. Most important question is the last question. Obviously, you know what you're doing. You have incredible compassion, incredible empathy, incredible wisdom and insight that people could benefit from. If someone wants to ask you questions, learn more, set up a time to talk with you, to figure their life out, or to even get in a coaching program, how would they go about connecting with you?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways. You can find me on Instagram at Balanceology Now, and my website is balanceologynow.com. Balanceology is the word balance, and then ology, O-L-O-G-Y. And you can email me at balanceologydenver@gmail.com.
That is beautiful. Well, this has been such an amazing time. I'm telling you, I'm just so juiced. That's how you always know great conversation, when you have more energy at the end of it than you did when you start, right?
Absolutely.
Did you have fun?
I had a blast. Thank you so much.
Oh, man, it's been my pleasure. So, Janna, I wish you all the best moving forward. If there's any way that we can collaborate and work together, you know that you have a supporter in me and in Ramos Law. And so, I wish you only the best as we go forward.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your time so much. It was so great to sit here with you.
Absolutely. And for those of you out there, remember, it's all about you, and it's all about making a difference. Go make one.